Great. Well, let me call to order this meeting of the City of Bloomington Planning Commission for August 10th, 2020. We have just one petition on our agenda tonight. That's PUD 1720, the McDowell Business Center LLC. But before we get to that, we'll start with our normal housekeeping. And first off, we'll call the roll.
Okay, great. Kate?
Here.
Kenzie?
Here.
Copper?
Here.
Herrera?
Here.
Burrell?
Here.
Cockrum? Chris is here, I think. Yeah, thank you. Susan Sandberg?
Here.
And Whistler.
Here.
And then St. John is absent tonight. Thanks.
Okay. So looks like we do have a quorum, so we'll continue with minutes to be approved. We have the minutes from July 2020 to be approved. Are there any questions or corrections for those minutes?
No corrections.
We have,
Motion to approve the minutes for July.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving those minutes, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. All right, those minutes are approved. We'll move on to reports, resolutions, and communications. Are there any reports or communications from staff?
No, we don't have any tonight. Thanks, Brad.
Any reports or communications from commissioners?
Tron and Wright Randolph here. I just have a quick report. The county is still working with their consolidated development ordinance rewrite. So I just wanted to plug the monroe.cdo or monroecdo.com. Go on that website. There's a lot of information and I just wanted to bring it to people's attention. And as more dates come, I'll be giving more updates as well.
All right. Thank you, Tron. Any other communications from commissioners? All right. Well, then I think we are on to petitions. As I mentioned, there's only one petition on the agenda tonight. This is PUD 17-20, McDowell Business Center LLC, property at 300 West Hillside Drive. The request is for an amendment to the preliminary plan and district ordinance for the Thomson PUD to allow 88 multifamily dwelling units and 21 single-family lots on parcel E. Before we get to the presentation, I want to recognize Commissioner Cockrum has a quick announcement.
Yeah, hi, this is Chris Cockrum, and I represent the owner, so I'm going to have to recuse myself from this meeting. So I have the property listed, and I'm currently marketing it for this one. So I will step off the meeting and have a great meeting.
All right, thank you, Chris. So we'll give Chris a second to disappear. All right. Excellent. So I believe Eric Grulich is the case manager. Do we have Eric here to present?
It's here.
Yes.
All right. Take it away, Eric.
Thank you. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. Blink once if yes.
Yes, we can see it. We can see it.
All right, so this is a petition for Tom Brennan via the McDowell Business Center for property and a building that he owns at 300 West Hillside Drive. So this property has been developed with a warehouse. It's about 100,000 square feet, Storage Express is on the north side of this warehouse, and the petitioner is proposing to demolish his portion of the warehouse to allow for the site to be redeveloped. So he is coming forward to the Planning Commission for a request to amend the preliminary plan and the district ordinance for the Thomson PUD to allow for 88 dwelling units and 21 single-family lots on this parcel, parcel E of the Thomson PUD. So again, just as the Planning Commission heard last month with the Habitat for Humanity petition, which also amended a portion of the Thomson PUD, and that area for the Habitat petition is shown just for reference on the kind of southeast side of the Thomson PUD. This side is on the east side of the Thomson PUD on parcel E. So this is the zoning for the Thomson PUD as well as some of the surrounding zoning. So just to the west of this is the McDowell neighborhood. To the east of this site is the Switchyard Park with all of its recent improvements. Just to the south of this site is the Crosley warehouse. This was redeveloped in 2012 for a community center. So the petitioner, as I mentioned, is looking to redevelop their property by tearing down the warehouse that is there and redeveloping that with 2 multifamily buildings as well as single-family lots. So one thing that's kind of important to notice here on the aerial photograph is that Hillside Drive is the main and kind of really only public access road into the site. So Hillside Drive comes off of Rogers Street and comes into the south side of this property. So that is the only means of egress to this site from a public road. So real quickly, here is the site plan that is being proposed. There are 2 5-story multi-family buildings that are being proposed on the north and south end of this site with 2 rows of single-family lots being proposed between there. There would be an alley that would come off of Hillside Drive that would circle through to connect to a public street that would have parallel parking on one side. So the single family lots have been arranged so that the lots will front, or the east lots will front on the Switchyard Park. And then the lots that are on the interior, lots 15 through 23, will have a garage that will be accessed off of the alley on the west side of the site. So the 2 multifamily buildings, the northern building would have some optional commercial space on the ground floor on the portion facing the Switchyard Park. The remainder of the ground floor would be parking underneath the building, and then there would be 4 stories of apartments above that. On the south end of the site would be another multifamily building with approximately 4,000 square feet of commercial space, again, parking on the ground floor, and then apartments on the upper floors above that. So one important thing to kind of notice on the plan that's proposed currently is that the public street that accesses Hillside Drive is being shown to go underneath that multifamily building. So that's something that's problematic for the fire department. So there will need to be a few changes for that aspect of this site plan. So this petition is being proposed to allow for redevelopment on this site for small single-family lots. These are very similar in size and design to the Matt Press project that is just a little bit further north on the Switchyard Park at the corner of Morton and Grimes. Those are small lots, single-family housing for some of that, small setbacks. So a more urban style dense development is being mimicked here on this particular site. So the single family lots would be developed with the R4 standards, which allow for smaller lot sizes, reduced side yard setbacks, and I'll kind of talk about those reduced setbacks and standards in just a second. One of the other important things to notice that I mentioned with this site is the access to Hillside Drive. Hillside Drive is the only public road that comes into this site. So one of the things that was important for staff was to arrange for pedestrian connectivity to this location. So the petitioners have been able to come up with a plan to get a sidewalk along the north side of Hillside Drive, as well as a tree plot, and that would extend all the way from this site to Rogers Street. So that's a obviously a big impact as it allows for pedestrians to get to this site and then also to the Switchyard Park further to the east. So that would extend all the way to Rogers Street. The right-of-way is very narrow along Hillside Drive here. So there's just barely enough room to get in a sidewalk and a tree plot along that frontage. So with this petition, the petitioners are proposing that the multifamily buildings would be designed to the Silver LEED certification. And then a similar certification or design requirement would be carried forward with the single family houses as well. The petitioner has given us several perspective elevations of what these single family buildings could look like within this development. And those are shown here on these renderings, showing some kind of comparable building styles that would be designed for this site. One of the things that staff would prefer to see or would like to see, hopefully, with by the time this goes to the next hearing, would be actual elevations, possible more specific requirements for the single family residences, depth of front porch, height, gable, elements like that, just to give a little bit better concrete idea of what these buildings would look like. For the multifamily buildings, again, we don't have any specific renderings for those two buildings. However, they have given us a couple of perspective elevations of what these could look like. So again, with the same comment for the single family residences, the department would like to see specific renderings of what the actual buildings would look like on this site, so that we can review how that would work together with the single family houses. One of the concerns that the department has is the two 5-story multifamily buildings that are on the north and south end of the site, and then possibly 2 and only 3-story buildings on the interior, and how those buildings would look specifically along the Switchyard Park. As the Plan Commission is aware, we've certainly spent a lot of money redeveloping the Switchyard Park, providing that as a open space, a major community asset. And so it's very important to make sure that the buildings that are along that trail have a cohesive design. So we would like to see some renderings specifically of how these multifamily and single family buildings would look, to get a better view of how that would all work together. So one thing that is important, and one of the probably most important aspects of this site, is not just how this looks along the Switchyard Park, which I just discussed, but also the style of development and the intensity of development on this site for the Switchyard Park. With the redevelopment of the Switchyard Park, one of the goals of the department and the administration is to place as many residences as appropriate along this area to promote safety, to promote use of the trail, to get people interacting in that environment. And so late last year, the administration worked with the consultant that designed the Switchyard Park to look at a prospective design for this specific property. There were 2 properties that the consultant looked at that were immediately adjacent to the Switchyard Park that provided ideal redevelopment opportunities. So this particular site was one of those areas that the consultant looked at for possible suggestions of how this could be redeveloped, placing density along the park that respected the design of the park, but also the neighborhood to the west. So the slide that is on the screen now is kind of a general site plan of how that plan was proposed. One of the important things to note about this prospective development or this site plan is the density. So this outlined a series of multifamily units. Approximately 160 multifamily units were suggested, along with restaurant and retail space, as well as parking spaces. So this site plan had a density of about 40 units per acre. The current petition has a density of about 20 units an acre if we used the dwelling unit equivalencies that were in the UDO. So here is kind of a massing of that plan that the consultant drew up. One other thing that I certainly want to make sure to point out is this study was just something that was kind of done internally. This was not a publicly vetted study that the neighborhood and other people were involved with. It was just kind of done as a way to give an idea of how this site could be redeveloped in a way that would get density along the trail, but at the same time not be intrusive to the single family neighborhood to the west. So again, this is just another rendering showing that elevation, showing the buildings. So they're 4-story buildings along the front. They stepped back to the west with parking areas up against the neighborhood to create a visual buffer. So this perspective plan here shows multifamily uses along the trail. It's got the taller buildings along the trail and stepping back as you get closer to the single family neighborhood. So while the department is certainly not saying that this is exactly what has to be done, this perspective style as well as density is something that we really want to encourage and promote along the trail. So one of the questions one of the areas that we certainly have open for discussion tonight is the development that is being proposed versus what might be a better, more appropriate design specifically along for the Switchyard Park. So with this development, the petitioner is proposing to utilize the R4 standards for the single family lots. There are specific reductions in the setbacks that are being requested for those lots from the R4 district. Those are related to minimum lot size, the setbacks, and then also as well with the subdivision request. The traditional subdivision requires a minimum of 67% of the lots to be served by alley. There's only one alley that is being done with this specific development. So there's only a 43% percentage of the lots that are served by that alley. Some of the other reductions deal with the minimum landscaped area, as well as architectural requirements for the articulation for the buildings, the step backs, and then also for parking spaces. The UDO does require a minimum number of parking spaces for multifamily projects that are up against R3 or R4 neighborhoods. And so this development would have a reduction from that minimum. 112 spaces would be required, and 54 spaces are being proposed within the ground floor of those two buildings. So these reductions are all outlined in staff's report. So while there are certainly several benefits and highlights of this development, certainly not the least of which are the Silver LEED certification that is being proposed for the multifamily buildings. One of the main issues that I mentioned is the design of this project along the Switchyard Park. Single family lots, specifically at this location, based on a different, very similar development just north of this, resulted in lots that were $300,000. Those type of high-end single family lots is not the type of housing that the community is needing. That is not the missing housing gap that we are trying to fill. So we're certainly concerned with the single family component here immediately adjacent to the trail, as well as the overall look and feel of this development along the trail, the 5-story buildings, and then with 2- and 3-story buildings between them. So certainly we would like to see renderings of how those would look along the trail between this and the next hearing. There are several elements of the proposed district ordinance that need to be modified based on some of our recommendations. So staff is recommending that this petition be forwarded to the second hearing, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Eric. Is there a representative of the petitioner who would like to add to the presentation?
There are a few, I think. I don't know who wants to speak. Can you guys put your hand up on the virtual hand? I'm trying to unmute you, Jeff, if it's you.
Hello, I'm here.
Great. There's Doug. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Doug.
Yeah, I'll I'll start this. Thank you for hearing us this evening. Tom Brennan, the owner, is actually texting me. He's having some technical difficulties, but he's would really like to speak to his petition here. And as soon as he gets up, I'm sure he'll pop in here. But I'll try to answer a few things and get some stuff started. I'm moving my daughter into college, so I'm in a hotel room in Oxford, Mississippi right now. First, a couple of things. I was going to just speak to the architecture, and we've taken quite a bit of feedback, and this is why you haven't seen our renderings yet of the project, because we're making some changes based on some feedback that we've heard. One of the things I will address right off the bat is that what we feel like is that when the city changed the zoning of the park from a rail switchyard and turned it into a wonderful park, it really changed the zoning and requirements of this site. It's a warehouse. It's got semi-truck traffic. Tom, I think, will speak to the fact that with I-69, there's more demand for warehouse space. And he just has felt like this is not the appropriate use, nor is this big, massive building that you see as you walk along the beeline. He might take offense with this, but it's not a very pretty building. It certainly does not fit the neighborhood nor the park and all of its new visitors. So what we did was, a few years ago, he had been approached by a development group about putting some apartments here as the park was coming to fruition. And so we were looking at a very dense deck with around 420 units of apartments, 3 or 4 buildings ranging from 4 to 6 stories with parking under them. And we had met with the city, the mayor's office and planning. And, we were really told back then that that's not what they wanted to see next to this park. They did not want it to be overshadowed by tall buildings and a dense project. And that project kind of died on the vine, so to speak. And Tom and I discussed it and decided that was really the best thing that could happen, because the more we walked the neighborhood and looked at how we could try to connect this site that has a very lack of connections. There's no way to connect it to the west. There's not an alley back there. There's not a street that continues through. This has been a railroad warehouse for the switchyard for quite some time. It didn't need any connections. The more we looked at it, though, we realized that it really didn't fit the neighborhood. It didn't need to be towering some development over these houses to the west. And did we really want these buildings towering over the park? So we kind of went back to the drawing board, and that's where we know that the least desirable part of this site will be the building, what we're calling lot number 1, that will be up against or 20 or 30 feet off of the development, the Storage Express building. That is a different parcel and is not owned by Tom. And when his building gets torn down, that building will stay and the wall will be covered with a material of some sort, and it will remain. But nobody wants to look out at that wall, specifically single family homes. So we felt putting a tall building there allowed us to put our narrow ends of our building. We're really not putting a really tall building along the park as much as we're kind of giving the narrow profile of the building is looking out at the park. So it minimized the impact on the park. And then we wanted to continue the single family lots. And Eric, as Eric, had shown the kind of consultant study, there's another study out there that consultant or another consultant had done that really drew a bunch of single family homes here. And this was years before the study you've been shown. And again, it was not a public study, but it was something that we had seen. And that's when we felt that this park, this is one of the few parcels where we can build some homes next to the park. There's other parcels where obviously on Walnut Street where you're not going to put homes, you're going to have commercial buildings and taller buildings. but we really wanted to continue the dialogue and the fabric of the neighborhood towards the park. So that's why you see these lots the way they are. And by putting an alley along our west side, it allows us to create a buffer between the neighborhood and access some of our lots. And these lots are small. Every time somebody wants to, and I've seen some emails circulating that compare these to just up the street. If you look on GIS at a minimum, you can see that the lots north of here on the P line are 45-foot wide, roughly, by 115 feet deep. That's almost twice as big as our lots. Our lots are, especially where we are now, are really, the ones along the B line are 40 by 60, and the lots in the back are roughly, if I can look here, 42 by 75. And that's because we put a small one-car garage or carport there as well. So the dialogue and the design of these houses are going to be more like a gabled L, a bungalow. These are going to be, the lots in the back are 1.5-story houses, and the lots in the front would be 2 to 3-story houses. Again, it depends on, because they're so narrow. I mean, the footprint of these things are, the most of these homes are only 900 to maybe 1,100, 1,200 square foot as a footprint. So we have tried to keep this small scale. We've tried to come up with a way to do the streetscape, and we understand that the fire department doesn't want us to go under the building. And so we have to look at this lot 24, the other commercial building, at the south end of our development along Hillside. And so we know we'll have some changes there. We also know that commercial on that corner is going to be pretty important. It's a tough commercial, especially given the pandemic that we're under, and we see a lot of vacant spaces around, and a lot of restaurants and shops that may not be as viable as they once were. So we don't want to be overly optimistic on the amount of commercial space. We also know, though, that the commercial space here will be as close to any commercial space that could access the park. So we think it's important, but we also think it's a really tough space because it's not visible to anybody else. So from November through, March, you might have a tough time having people drive here or use it because the park may not be as busy. So we have to be cautious, but we'd certainly see some commercial space as part of this PUD. What we've really done is that we know, because the park has changed, the PUD needs to be modified. And as you can imagine, this Thomson PUD never envisioned that the rail yard would not be there. So there's almost no uses for our site that would work under the current PUD, which is why we need to modify it. We've met with the neighborhood and tried to, at least some of the executive committee, and I believe my client has had some discussions with others about what we're trying to do here as far as small scale residential development. And that's the thing I think that the consultant's plan loses track of completely. And I know Tom mentioned this to me this morning, is that the consultant's plan is a consultant in Indianapolis, not somebody that lives here or owns this building. And Tom has looked at this and walked the neighborhood and spoke to the neighbors and said, we need some single family homes. This is not a bunch of tall, multi-story, high density buildings here. We could certainly work on some changes to this site, but we still feel it's really important to have some houses here. We've heard some feedback that perhaps some townhomes would be something that would be desirable. And we certainly agree, because townhomes are smaller footprint. They're usually 21 to 24 feet wide. And we've been working on a site plan that might get 12 of them along the B line that would look more like brownstones or walk-ups, and then would face the park and have maybe parking on the back side. So there are things we're working on. What we have really done to kind of finalize my comments is that we've tried to meet everything that the newly approved UDO is asking of us, with green design, with LEED Silver and LEED for homes, that will be benchmarks that all of the development here will need to meet, as well as affordability. We've met the percentages that the UDO, again, that was vetted over years requests of us for a PUD amendment. To us, the neighborhood is important. My office is 2 blocks from here, and a rental house that I own right next to my office. So this is just an important site, probably in my eyes, one of the most important sites to be developed. And we haven't gone about it without looking at it and taking our time and being cautious on what needs to be here. So again, I thank you for your time. Hopefully Tom will jump in here and add some things. And if not, I'm taking notes and asking or answering any questions you might have. So thank you, Brad.
All right, thank you, Doug. Tom, are you with us?
If he joined, I asked him to unmute, so he'll need to unmute himself to speak.
I'll just text him and ask him to unmute. It's spacebar, I think, isn't it?
Well, if you hold the space bar, that's a temporary unmute.
Ah, okay.
To unmute is should be in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. You can click on the little microphone icon to unmute.
Come on, Thomas.
Hello,
Tom?
can you hear me?
Hey, we got you, Tom.
Oh my, boy, I really apologize for my total ineptitude when it comes to new technologies. Anyway, I didn't really have an opportunity to hear much of what has transpired at this point, but just as a little break in here to kind of give you some information about me. I'm a longtime resident of Bloomington, Monroe County. I've been here ever since the days of breaking away, and so I've seen a lot of changes, and unfortunately I've been a part of it. I've back years ago I had a blue jeans store on Kirkwood Avenue, and they filmed the movie right in front of my shop, and they came in and asked if they could put this rail track along the sidewalk in front of the Indiana Theater and so on. And it was pretty cool because we got a chance to meet the actors and all that stuff. But nonetheless, I ran a used blue jeans store back then, and had since then gone on to operate some other businesses. I was probably the first person to bring in bottled water into Bloomington back when the first PCB scares kind of arose, and we sold a lot of water. But aside from that, I moved my company, All Source Packaging Group, into the building that we're talking about back in 2002. I came in there as a tenant, and shortly after I got in there, Blanks and Prairie Dog and the mouse pad people, they basically kind of went out of business. And so the landlord at that time was a guy named Rod McDonald, and his company was Crosley Building Corporation based out of Ohio. And he was working with a realtor here in town, and they brought in American Fasteners from out on Liberty Drive. And so he said, you know, Tom, he said, I'm going to have to move your company to another part of the building. And so consequently, they did a little build out for me, and we moved and moved my equipment, my assembly lines. I had some bottling lines and so on and so forth, and mixing tanks and so on. And shortly after I moved to the new location, he came back to me again, and he said, you know, these folks at American Fasteners, they want more space, and I'm going to have to move you again. And I thought, well, this is kind of crazy. And I said, Rod, why don't you just sell me the building? And so he said, well, make me an offer. So we negotiated back and forth, and lo and behold, we came to an accepted price, and I started paying a mortgage on a building that I probably couldn't afford. But nonetheless, the packaging company grew, and it managed to sustain itself for a number of years. until we ran into some issues with the economy back around 2010, 2011. And then American Fasteners actually moved out of the building at that point in time as a tenant. And so I was kind of left with in a little bit of a lurch. And so I went about the business of trying to reestablish the building as a real kind of a versatile structure that had offices and had kind of just plain warehouse space but anyway, we put in a large fulfillment operation, taking care of a company called Cyclo Industries, and then in the process, let's see, Sprout Box came in there as a tenant, and we've had different computer operations that people have brought in there, and home health care, and there's a fellow in there that still is storing Spanish wines, and we've had solar panel people in there that take a pretty fair amount of area. Cardinal Spirits has been in and out at different times in their existence. So, just a real variety of people. At different times, I get requests from people, could you let us use some of your space? You've got, this 100,000 square foot warehouse, and the Bloomington lacrosse team came in there, and they used a little part of the warehouse and for their throwing lacrosse balls around and stuff. And it's funny, even today, if you look a little bit here and there, you'll still find a stray lacrosse ball bouncing around somewhere. But anyway, and currently we have there's a temporary shelter in there now, taking care of some of the homeless people that would potentially be at risk of spreading the virus if they're left out with the rest of the population. And so we have 14,000 square feet that they're using right now. So it's not been without a lot of different things happening in terms of the building and the comings and goings, and sometimes it would be a lot of income, and then other times it would be really not so much. But we've always kind of managed to make things work one way or another. Over time, it's been difficult with seeing a lot of the syringes, and there's been windows that have been had rocks thrown through them, and so on and so forth. And so when the trail came in, it really looked like a pretty neat opportunity to at least give the buildings some more visibility, and hopefully get some additional tenants and so on. And then as we realized that the park was happening, there were people that approached me about, hey, what are you going to do with your building? Why don't we get, team up and let's develop it? And I'd never really seen myself as a developer, and I'm really not, but I guess sometimes you have to, kind of wear the hat when you need to.
Mr. Brennan, you have 2 minutes left.
2 minutes left? Okay.
Yep.
All righty. Well, anyway, at a certain point in time here, the city kind of jumped in, and we had a meeting with the mayor. I think it was probably 3.5 or 4 years ago. And the mayor at that time indicated that he wanted to see single family homes on that site. Well, that wasn't what the developers wanted. And so we went back to the drawing board and made various design changes and so on and so forth, and had meeting after meeting with the city, with the administration, planning, and so on and so forth. And we feel like we've come up with a pretty nice compromise here that is a compromise that encompasses all of the elements of the Bloomington population, including seniors, families, professional people. We want this development to take on that aspect, because that's what the park is for. And the neighborhood has been very, very supportive. We've had meetings with them, the executive council, and also with some of the residents that live adjacent to the property. And everybody has been very, very gracious and very approving of the project that we're trying to put together here. I would only say one other thing, and this would be a project where we'd have a real variety of different individuals. And I think also that this is a special kind of a special opportunity for transitioning this property into something that the city can be proud of, and certainly the residents will be comfortable with. And I'd like to see the chance to going forward to take advantage of this transitional part of this project, and certainly would hope for your consideration, and we're open for discussions. Everybody has ideas, and our design team has spent a considerable amount of time and going through various things, and I
Great,
think
that's
what
your
we've
time,
come up
Mr.
with is
Brennan.
something very
Mr.
good.
Brennan, sorry to interrupt you. That's your 20 minutes.
That's all right. Had I been a little less inept, would have probably
You're
helped.
fine.
All right, thank you, Tom. You will now, in this next section, maybe get a chance to elaborate. We will move now to questions from commissioners. So, commissioners, any questions for either staff or for the petitioner?
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner
This,
Burrell.
yes, this question is for Eric. When he was showing the comparing the plans, the plans that we have in front of us with the plans that have been done, the study that have been done, you said that the study was hoping for 40 units per acre, and that this plan has 20 units per acre, but the study includes that parcel to the south, which in the photo that we're looking at is building number 1. And what they are proposing does not include building number 1, correct? That site is going to be undeveloped. What is happening to that site, to that parcel?
So the petitioner has proposed to give the lot south of Hillside Drive to the city for us to use to meet the housing needs of the community in whatever form that takes.
Okay, yeah, so that's what I thought, what I remembered from last time. So we can't compare the consultant study with 40 units per acre because it includes that parcel, and what they're proposing is in a smaller parcel. So
yeah, so certainly the lot to the south of Hillside is smaller. The consultant's study didn't break up, south side of Hillside parcel
correct.
with one thing, north side to something else. It was just, the entire area as a whole. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just hard to compare. I mean, we can't compare it because they're two different units in terms of acreage.
Yes, I think comparing the density 1-to-1, apples to apples, is not, I think you're right, that is difficult because the developer is choosing to not include that lot in this development, which we would prefer otherwise. But I do think just on its face, when you look at the large multifamily buildings here planned as opposed to the, row of single family lots, that also kind of tells the same story without the specific density numbers, of course. That what the administration would like to see would be something denser, giving more people an opportunity to live on the park than just the 20 families that can afford new single family lots here, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I don't think it will be 20 families. I mean, you will have 20 single family homes, but we're also going to have multifamily on both ends, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, so the multifamily are just proposed at being 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units.
Yes, so it will be more density than just the 20 R4 lots, correct?
Right, so the 20 units an acre that I came up with is all of the lots, all of the units, the multifamily, the single family on Mr. Brennan on the north side of Hillside Drive. So certainly you're not going to be able to double that density on just that small parcel on the south side of Hillside.
Yeah, which considering that we only have one entrance, I am not too concerned with that. I mean, egress there on Hillside Drive. Well, thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions from commissioners, either for staff or for the petitioner? I see Commissioner Kate has a hand up there.
Yeah, I just have two quick questions. I think they're both for Eric. The first is, I just want to make sure, and what we're essentially doing tonight is deciding whether or not to bring this to a second meeting, or potentially to approve changes to the PUD standards now for whatever ultimate design of this might look like. Am I right about that?
Yes. So the request is to amend the PUD. So the Planning Commission has three options. They can deny it, they can approve it, or they can continue it to the second hearing. The department's recommendation is to gather input from the community, from the Planning Commission, and then hear this again at a second hearing with any possible changes that might come about.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then my second question is just what is the status of the South Walnut parcel, if you will, realizing there are 11 owners to one, I guess, here. But what, if anything, is the status of that which featured also in the consultant's plan in terms of acquiring the ability to build on that? Is there any kind of time frame that?
Yep. So we had a discussion with a prospective developer late last year who was looking at just the night moves portion of the property that the city owns. The Meineke portion of that property was not in play. So we did look at a possible development on the portion of the property that the city owns where night moves used to be.
Yeah, an RFQ was put out and a developer was picked. So we are working, the city is working with a developer to develop just that portion without the Meineke, as Eric mentioned.
And what kind of
That's
number
very
of
beginning
units
stages.
Sure.
Yeah, even when they did the selection of who to work with, because it's an affordable housing project, so that's why they did it that way, I believe. There weren't renderings. It was just an idea of how they would operate and plan the building. So we actually haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And just to follow up quickly on the first question there. So regardless of what happens tonight, well, I should say regardless, as long as this moves forward tonight, we will ultimately see this again for a final site plan approval, correct?
Yes. So,
Okay.
just to kind of give a recap for everybody in the Planning Commission, what is being proposed for the Planning Commission to approve are the standards that would govern this development, as well as the preliminary plan that I'm showing on the screen now. So the preliminary plan shows the general layout of the property, where the buildings are located, where the streets are located, and then the district ordinance that would govern that development. So so there would be a final site plan that would come back, but that final site plan should look very, very identical to what the preliminary plan is and is based on those standards.
All right. Sorry, I didn't see who that was.
Jillian.
Kinsey, okay, yes.
Yes.
Please go
All
ahead.
right. So I would like to actually ask a question about the district ordinance and the choice of R4. And I wonder, Eric and Jackie, if you could talk a little bit through that designation for district, and if any others were considered, just as a point of discussion here.
Yep. So the R4 district is the most compact and urban style zoning district that we have in the new UDO. So this has the smallest lot size, the smallest side yard setbacks. So that is why they went with the R4 district as just the base. Certainly, as you can see in what's brought up here in the proposed standards and some of those deviations, they're requesting to modify those standards even further. So the R4 was, is basically as low as you can get, and they want to bring some of those standards just a little bit lower to allow for a more compact urban design.
And were there any other discussions from either the petitioner or from you guys in terms of the design that was offered by the Switchard Park plan, the consultant's design that discussed other district options?
Yep. So we certainly shared the consultant study with the petitioner. So the petitioner proposes these standards. So then it is the planning commission's job to say, yes, we approve these, or we modify those. So we shared with them the consultant study and how that looks, the different design that was being proposed. The petitioner has chosen to come forward with what you see in front of you today.
And was that plan, am I correct, that it's a residential multifamily, or what was the plans, the consultants?
So the consultant's plan for this particular portion was multifamily design. So certainly that does not preclude any of those units from being condos. It was just not, it was a multifamily design as opposed to a single family design where you've just got lots and one house on each lot.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
Eric, can you show the massing sheet? Can you show the massing again? Yeah. So those would be multifamily buildings. And then you can see with a small bit of commercial there at the corner of Hillside and Switchyard. And then parking underneath in at least 3 of the buildings, I believe. But the rest would be multifamily, either apartments or condos, so probably some mix.
Okay. And then go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was just gonna say we would have to look and see which the plan was done before the new UDO was done. So we would have to look and see, which zoning districts would accommodate the kind of densities thereafter, basically.
Okay. And then I'm also interested in talking a little bit about Hillside and concerns about just that as the sole entry point for this development. Is there anything else about expansion, or, it is tight, there is no denying, and concerns about just traffic egress in that space?
Yeah, so there just are not any other options. There was a portion, and I don't know if you can see my cursor, there was a right-of-way that extended through the site and stubbed in. However, that was vacated a long time ago. So that opportunity is kind of lost. So unfortunately, we are stuck with Hillside Drive being the only way in and out at this time. Certainly, if the Storage Express building to the north of this redevelops in some manner, that's this street that is shown through here could be extended and connect to Grimes. That stub street is not being shown on this preliminary plan. That is something that could certainly be possible with some modifications. The other plan for the consultant shows that driveway going all the way to the north side, which could certainly be extended to Grimes should that Storage Express warehouse be removed.
Okay. Yeah, were there any other options here that would, I don't know if there were other design options in the original or in the consultant's design plan that were worthy of greater consideration here? It just seems.
I can only testify really to a limited extent on the consultant's plan and the information that they showed.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Those were my main concerns, I think, about this space. Thanks.
Okay. I believe I saw Tron had a hand raised there.
Yes, I just wanted to confirm because I just heard that there was 20 residential lots and I have 21 from the packet. Just wanted to make sure we get the right number.
I believe it's 21.
Does the petitioner want to answer that? I just want a definitive answer, sorry.
Counting the lots that I see right here, they're 21. The 20 may have been a typo. I apologize.
No, Jackie accidentally said that. I just wanted
Sorry,
to make
Eric.
sure.
I said the wrong number. It was just a guesstimate. I don't actually know how many there are. So yes, if Eric says there are 21, there are 21.
Perfect. I just think that's a big component of this plan.
All right, any other questions from commissioners? Going once. Going twice. Okay, we will move on to public comment then. So if you are here to give public comment on this petition, you need to indicate that by clicking on the participants tab at the bottom of your screen and clicking on the raise hand button. That's how we'll know that you wish to give public comment. Jackie will recognize you in the as close as we can get to the order in which the hands are raised. And once you're recognized, she'll unmute you. You may also have to unmute yourself, as we've learned already this meeting. And then you'll have 5 minutes to give your comment on this petition. So
thanks, Brad. I think Miss Piedmont Smith is ready to go. Are you there as well?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
It's your turn. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, please be sure to state your name for the record before you give your comment. Thanks.
Sure. My name is Isabel Piedmont Smith. I'm the City Council representative for District 5, and this petition property is located in District 5. I also live very close by. I feel like it's very important that the internal study that was done for this area was not vetted by the public. I think that's an important detail. So the neighbors were not able to weigh in on those plans. I understand the need for denser housing, and I am in support of more housing because we really do need it in our community to drive down the price of housing and just to provide a variety of options for people who are seeking housing. However, the plan as it is with the 2 5-story buildings on either end, it just seems inappropriate to me to be in the McDowell Gardens neighborhood. I would find a development with maybe 3 stories all the way across to be more appropriate, so that it could then step down to the 1 and 2 story buildings, mostly 1 story actually on that part of Madison Street. So I'm in favor of density, but I think this is not an appropriate way to do it here so close to single family homes. I also feel strongly that there needs to be more connectivity. I don't understand why Driscoll or especially Wilson Street wouldn't be extended through to the B line, another block to the east. That seems like that would take care of some of the emergency access concerns and just the connectivity that is so important as part of our comprehensive plan. So those are 2 recommendations I would have for changes to this plan. I do appreciate the LEED Silver plans for both the multifamily and the single family, but I really think that we should look at maybe townhomes 2 or 3 stories in this area instead of the 5-story height on either end. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Greg, I think you're ready to go.
Okay, great, thanks. Hi, I'm Greg Alexander. I just want to draw your attention to this development. It was mentioned earlier. It's about 1,000 feet north, I think, of what's proposed, the new houses built in 2012, 2013. And I happened to see one of them. It had its first owner and then it had second owner. So we got two two price points. In 2013, it sold for $283,000. And then in 2019, last year, it sold for $415,000. And that's not only a shockingly large number, it's a 6.6% annual return on investment compounded over the 6 years that they own the house. I mean, that's incredible. That's actually affordable housing in a weird sort of way, because the people that lived there for those 6 years didn't pay interest. They sold the house for enough profit that it paid back their interest on their bank loan, and then some. I mean, that's incredible. That's not affordable. That is a disaster, because only a very rich person could get that affordable opportunity to pay $283,000 up front. So when we have like single family that close to the park, that close to the Beeline, really that close to campus, it's going to be a real challenge to get that to be affordable in any realistic sense of the world. It's going to be great for investors, but it's going to be very discouraging for anybody that just wants to live there. And that's when I look at the multifamily that is part of the proposal before you, that's 88 units in those two bookend buildings. And if you were to replace those buildings with single family at the same density as the rest of the project, it looks like you'd get 8 extra lots. So we'd be replacing 88 units with 8 units, 10 or 11 times density increase by having multifamily there. And it's just extraordinary how few people you can house on this land, or how many people you can house on this land. And I would really beg you to consider housing more. And something that Councilmember Piedmont Smith mentioned is the connectivity. And that's actually a really unique factor about this parcel, is it has great connectivity. It has exactly one car entrance, on Hillside, which ordinarily I'd be really opposed to that. But for pedestrian connectivity, it has the Beeline. It has the entire Switchyard Park. There's going to be a bridge across the creek, so you can come out, I guess, behind Night Moves now onto Walnut. It's going to have great bike and ped connectivity and poor car connectivity. That's really flipping the script. Almost everywhere else in the city, especially when we start using this word PUD, it has really convenient kind of, I could say bad things about the car connectivity, but it's car first. And then absolutely no pedestrian or bike connectivity whatsoever has actually been the norm for most of the PUDs that we've built. And this is a place where the bike and ped connectivity will be superior to the car connectivity by any possible metric. And that is an extremely valuable thing. This is the lot that needs to be built up to the highest possible density. One of the neighbors wrote in your packet and said that we should put all the density on the lot that, the Night Move side of things where it faces onto Walnut. And that's a complete non-starter to me, because that's the old style where the car connectivity comes first, where your front yard is literally a highway and the discouragement to walking is epic. This is just such an opportunity. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Greg.
Hey, Elizabeth, are you set?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Elizabeth Coxash. I am a resident of McDowell Gardens and a property owner. And I have been concerned about this. When Tom came to us 2 years ago, he was talking about 2-story condos or townhomes, which our neighborhood enthusiastically approved. Now this comes back with 2 buildings, 5 stories high. That's 2.5 times the density of what was originally proposed. And my concern is safety. Number one, there's going to be a road in there, not very wide. Has this been cleared by the state fire marshal for access for the higher units in case there's a fire? I'm sure all the units are going to be required to have sprinklers, but if there is a fire truck's going to have to get in there and have to have access to get to the upper units. Number one. Number two, you're asking for a variance, I believe that's the term, for the parking spaces of this to about half of what it would normally be per bedroom. How's this going to impact the neighbors around? Are the streets going to be completely filled with cars? I'm all for bike ped access, but unless there's some sort of stipulation about car ownership, the rental units will be serviced by at least one car, if not more. So how's this going to impact on the neighbors? Number 3, we've had density in our neighborhood in the past, and it resulted over the last 2 years in a sewage situation in front of Sweetgrass along Grimes, where we had turds in the street. And then the city went ahead and upgraded our sewage. So I don't think we're going to have that problem with this. But this neighborhood is an old neighborhood. We have old water lines, old sewer lines, hardly any stormwater, if any. So this density, it really concerns me for this very old neighborhood. So there's another thing, and that is Hillside. Hillside is not very wide. Hillside, on either side of Hillside, is in a historic district, so you can't widen it by tearing down these houses. They're protected. And it cannot go through the Switchyard Park. And that's in the transportation plan. And I made sure that that wasn't going to be there. So it would affect those children who would go to the splash pad just north of this. So we wouldn't have a thoroughfare going through that. You're talking about limited access on a street that will dead end to the Switchyard Park. This is really limiting for this project. I just don't see the density necessary in order to do this. Not only that, the 2 5-story high buildings are going to loom over those poor neighbors who have purchased in this area. How would you like a situation of a possible peeping Tom situation where you can't go out and garden or even open your windows of your house for fear of somebody peeping into your house? I just don't think that this is appropriate for this area. That's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Jessica.
Hi, my name is Jessica Height. Thank you all for your time and listening to this important issue. I'm a resident and a frequent in McDowell Gardens, and I use the Beeline and the Switchyard Park quite a bit. And I think that there are a number of issues with trying to increase the density in housing in Bloomington. I understand that we need more affordable housing, but at the rate at which high density, and let's be honest here, these are luxury apartments that are still not affordable for the majority of people. They're luxury apartments, especially if they're located along the Beeline. So 1, they're not affordable. 2, they're high density, and there's no infrastructure to meet that high density. So if you ever lived over here and you were at rush hour at Grimes and Rogers or anywhere in the surrounding area, you would know that it is a complete gridlock. So the proposal to put in more high density housing, not just in this area along the Beeline, but along Walnut, along Grimes, and then along Rogers is going to exacerbate that issue and make it a complete nightmare. And currently there's no way to widen any of those roads given the surrounding neighborhoods. And if you do that, you will destroy the connectivity and the things that make Bloomington a great community to live in. The Beeline is amazing. The Switchyard Park is amazing. Bloomington has hardly anything to do here except the Beeline and the Switchyard Park. So you're going to keep increasing density. And what are these people supposed to do? Okay, so they'll all flock to the Switchyard. At that intersection right there, right by the ballpark and right by the bridge, it's already congested during a pandemic. You throw in more high density housing along there, it's going to, again, exacerbate that problem and turn this beautiful park, which we've been waiting for forever, and the Beeline, which we waited for forever, into this congested place that's not fun for pedestrians or bikers or people using the ballpark or residents that live in the surrounding area, including those apartments. And I also think that these high density apartments that they're building in the surrounding areas, they're made of cheap material that degrade and mold so quickly that they're not a good investment long term. They leave the neighborhood quickly turning into materials that are breaking down and looking terrible. So for long-term investment for the community members who have lived here for 20 to 50 years and have been trying to get this area to be nicer, to not have syringes in the street, to not have sewage, to not be filled with garbage, we'll get a brief reprieve from that because of the park, only to then have it turned back because these apartments become so outdated and in disrepair so quickly. And I've been in lots of cities where they build these apartments in old neighborhoods. You decrease the value and they outdate them so quickly. So, you know, Bloomington has a good thing going for it. I would encourage you to think about that and to put the brakes on this idea of high density housing.
Can we put this on my box outside?
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin Romanek. I also live along the warehouse here. I'm also a chemist at IU, and I got to work with some of the data analysis and the testing of the switchyard park. So is there any sort of issue with that, possibly with the warehouse, there being polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons or heavy metals in that area? I know if you dig in my backyard, I could find glass and coal ash from, you know, probably 1920. So that's one of my questions. I'm very against the 4 and 5 story apartments there. I just don't think it'll be good with the traffic issues. Greg, you mentioned the car stuff on Walnut. Having those high density apartments there and that being an issue, I think those people that if they were riding their bike or walking, they'll use the front of their house and go, or their apartments, and go to the Beeline area, Switchyard Park, and access Bloomington that way, as we all do from this neighborhood. I agree with Isabel and Elizabeth about the 2 to 3 story townhomes if they have to build townhomes in this area. The 4 and 5 story, I think, you just tower over us. And with those, possibly be thinking about the future, where Storage Express might not be there anymore, and the connectivity with Grimes. So having a full scale building there without a way to get a through street through there kind of cuts you off with the future. So yeah. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Jack.
All right, thank you. For the record, it says Jan Beulah Baker, but it is me, Jack, speaking. I just wanted to address a few issues this evening with you. We've met, the executive committee of the neighborhood, McDowell neighborhood, has met with Tom Brennan over the last several months and gone through several iterations of this project. And as we talked, the project changed and changed again and changed again. Because as he was talking with planning, the requirements were changing. As you heard earlier, originally there was talk of putting in all single family housing. The mayor felt with that. That has now changed to where the mayor's office is proposing, based on its architectural study, not vetted through public means, it's a private thing, wants to put up 5 apartment buildings along there. Where Mr. Brennan originally wanted to do housing and still would like to do a large component of housing. He's come to the point now where he's proposing 2 buildings, multi-story buildings on either end, and housing, and it's not something that he's the happiest with, nor is it something that we in the neighborhood who have talked with him are the happiest with, but he's finding it acceptable, and personally, I'm finding it acceptable. Not the best, but acceptable. There's some issues that are, I want to take up in the planning interpretation document you have in front of you tonight, and say a few things about some of the things being thrown at this project that I think that are not accurate. The comprehensive plan, and it's quoted on page 4 of your document, says Bloomington needs to add stock to meet its housing needs, especially that for families and young professionals. Planning is interpreting this to mean single family housing doesn't fit the needs of the community. And it would serve the needs of the few, planning says, and the homes would be too expensive. And I'm asking why too expensive here at this site when market rate housing exists everywhere in this city and is nothing out of the ordinary. Well-designed single-family housing group we've already talked about is a couple blocks up the trail and right next to Hopscotch Coffee Bar on Morton Street. Nothing is said about those homes being too expensive in that area, and nor is it said anything about that for a myriad of other buildings in this city. So there's nothing wrong with market rate. Why in this area is it wrong, is what I'm asking. And has anybody questioned the probable causes of living in an apartment or condo if multiple multi-story high-density buildings are built? If we had, say, 5. Has anybody worked out the cost? I'm guessing, and I'll share my guess with you, an apartment cost in this city is $1,200 a month easily, and possibly more. And a condo buy-in generally is $300,000 plus. And we're proposing to put a series of 5 of them along the trail. That's acceptable. But to have a market rate house there that might sell for $300,000 or more, somehow it's not right. And I don't understand the difference between those two things, why one is right and why one is wrong. The planning says that the single family homes would meet the needs of a select few, and I don't understand that comment at all. There's something implied there that it's somehow wrong for this area to have single family housing there. And who is the select few? I don't understand who they are. Are they thus in the neighborhood who have lobbied to have single family housing close by? Or are they the people that would buy houses there? What is the select few and what's wrong with having the single family houses? I'm saying that there's nothing wrong in placing single family homes here. And in fact, it would be a boon to the area and would establish a feeling of neighborliness and security to passersby to go past. If you had apartment buildings and houses, one tends to feel the more the neighborlyhoodness of things and to feel more secure. And I think that's a good reason to think about allowing these houses to sit there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
I think that was our last one, Brad.
We have any comments from the Facebook feed?
No, nothing there. Nope.
Okay. All right. Well, if there is no more public comment, we'll come back to the commission for any final questions or for a motion. I see Commissioner Sandberg.
Thank you. I have been listening very carefully, and I must say I tend to agree with a lot that we're hearing this evening from our neighbors who live in the area. I also appreciate the input from Councilmember Isabel Piedmont Smith, who represents this area. And I will be certainly voting in favor of continuing this on for another discussion, because I would like to see some of that 5-story reduced back down to more of the townhome feel. I certainly agree with that being a much more welcoming, if it is the intent to have that along the beeline, to look more friendly and in scale with residential living. With respect to the safety issues that we've heard with regard to that consultant study that said, oh, the more eyes on the beeline, the more eyes on the switchyard, the safer it is. But those eyes can certainly come from a townhouse configuration along that. It does not have to be a towering 5-story building. So I would be hoping that the project could be brought down to a more neighborhood friendly and compatible scale. I also have the concern over increased density being an issue with the traffic and the connectivity. This is a wonderful property. We have an opportunity to see wonderful things develop here. But there's just something about that consultant study that just does not square with it being the proper density, proper height for the particular neighborhood that it's going to be a part of. So thank you very much for everyone who's been here this evening to speak to the issue.
Thank you, Susan. Any other questions, comments, or a motion from commissioners?
Can we address the 2 questions? I think there were several questions, I think, in some of the commenters' remarks, but I wonder if we can raise or at least have some response to Isabella Piedmont Smith's question about why can't Driscoll or Wilson be continued, and just to kind of discuss these roads and their status. I'm presuming, Eric, that this is the one that you said had already been vacated some time ago. At least that is Wilson, I think.
Was that directed at Eric?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm here. So there are not any public streets that stub into this property. So if you look at the aerial here, sorry, I'm getting that back up. You can see along the west side of this site, there is a row of continuous single-family houses with no right-of-way connections here. There's no alleys. There's no public streets. It is an isolated island.
Okay.
Eric, to follow up on that, the right-of-way that was once there, is there now something built in that right-of-way?
So I'm not sure if it is the northern connection or the southern one that was vacated, but that right-of-way was vacated. It was given back to those adjacent property owners. Certainly, the petitioner can approach those property owners and try to acquire that property back to create that right-of-way connection. Absolutely.
Eric, can I follow up on that too and just ask, because I think there was sort of a hint in the materials and maybe in some of the comments tonight about what might happen with the remaining third of the warehouse and having some of the connectivity issue solved if in fact that becomes available for development as well. Is that a prospect that's stick in any kind of reasonable time frame?
I can't even begin to speak to that. Storage Express moved into that building several years ago. They invested a substantial amount of money turning the inside into storage units. Nothing's ever permanent, certainly. That could be redeveloped at any time, but that's not owned by the petitioner. So that's just an unknown.
And I wonder if there's another question that was raised by Kevin Romanek about any of the land quality or concerns about contamination in this site, if that at all. I didn't read anything like that in the Environmental Commission report and wonder if that's a concern or issue in this.
So that would probably be a good question for the petitioner if they have done any sort of phase 1 or phase 2 environmental study on this. I would imagine it's possible, being immediately adjacent to the switchyard and this being a warehouse, that is possible. I have no idea if such a study has been done yet.
Hey, Eric, this is Doug Bruce. I think I'm unmuted here now. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Doug.
Okay, I can answer a couple of these things. First off, very early on, and I mean, we have had this thing, this parcel, looking at it as a development for 8 years, at least. And what I can say is years ago, or a few years ago, we looked at and saw that, yeah, that stub would be great to have it connect into this site. And then Tom approached some of the neighbors there, and I think there is a structure built where it would continue, and none of the neighbors along there were interested in any sort of sale. So obviously we can't take it, and if they don't want to sell, and it's just it really makes this site tough because again, we're only connecting to Hillside. It's just not a perfect world. We would love to have a grid of streets running through here from east to west, but it's just not going to happen. The other portion is, I know I've spoken with Jefferson Shreve, who owns Storage Express. He's reached out to me a few times as this project has moved forward with some concerns and questions and emails. I don't think that's going to go anywhere anytime soon. I mean, that's just not something that, if that ever happens, that's his prerogative, his development. But I don't think at this time there's any plans for Storage Express to suddenly just decide to go away or sell. Now, I would say that we've got to look at some things for the buildings on the south end of this. But when we've added the alley and the street that we've designed down the middle of this development that would connect to Hillside also meets the UDO standards for a public street other than going under the building, which is something we're working on now in our designs. But the street that we'll show, and there's a more updated version of this drawing that has the parking and the street trees and the tree plots. That's something that we have worked out. That's why, again, our lots are actually not as large as you see in this development, because that street width and required right-of-ways reduced the size of our lots. So we have had fire truck access in mind other than getting under the building, but we will meet their turning radiuses. I mean, that's been an issue we've had since day one. And I would add that the consultant's plan, I don't think addresses that at all. I mean, this has always been a dead end development because there's no other access. You're not bringing a fire truck down the Beeline Trail unless you get somebody really mad. So we've always looked at how are we going to have fire truck access? And I think that helps answer a question that was raised earlier. The only other thing I would say is about the environmental portion. I don't know if there's been a phase 1 or phase 2. Again, all of these things cost money. And as this goes forward, I mean, Tom has invested a lot of money in this PUD to get it to this point that you see now. And I'm sure any bank, any financing is going to require a phase 1 and phase 2. So that'll be taken care of. This whole site has changed. It used to be in a floodplain, most of Switchyard Park. And of course, the city had those maps redone. So this building, there was about 10 feet of the very southeast corner of this site that was in the floodplain that got removed when the flood maps were revised, which makes development possible on the entire site. So hopefully that answers some of the questions that you've had.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Any other questions from commissioners? If there are no questions, would someone like to make a motion?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Trent.
I do have a comment, not a question, but this is the time for that. It sounds like my observation is there's some mixed feelings. Sounds like some people like some of the aspects of the plan and some people think some of those aspects need to be reworked. Kind of my quick summary of this is, we're looking at 100, and I'm not talking about the south lot. it's not part of this, so I'm just going to exclude that from this conversation. So we're looking at 124 bedrooms with 1 and 2 bed units. That's pretty good as far as I like not seeing 3 or 4. But then you only have 21 residential lots. There's a huge contrast between those two. It doesn't make sense. It states in our packet that the comprehensive plan is clear that adjacent to the switchyard park should be planned with increased residential density for the benefit of a wide array of residents, not just a select few. I think that's exactly what we're looking at here. One thing I would like before we just move this to a vote is maybe a little more direction moving forward. Or, you know, we're going to potentially see the exact same plan. Townhouses seem like a great idea. Maybe turning some of those into condos. Want to elaborate with that a little bit, because I think parks are extremely valuable for communities. And I think the Bryan Park here is a great park, and that's because of the neighborhood that surrounds it. I think the people that go to parks and the neighborhoods that surround it are what make parks work. So, you know, this is a big ask, especially since the park is just now being constructed and used. Well, it's already mostly constructed. So I wanted to state that. I'm still not super clear if Driscoll Street is a platted alleyway or not. Eric, you did address that, but it seemed a little uncertain. So if you want to look into that, just to make sure that's clear, that would be great. A lot of those roads were platted alleyways in the 50s, and a lot of them haven't been vacated. Another thing, a 5-story building is pretty high. Asking to reduce it by, of course, asking to reduce it by 2 stories sounds like a big ask, but 3 stories is still really high to adjacent historic neighborhoods. A quick GIS analysis, if you look at the neighborhood immediately behind it, you have 11.5 to 12 acres of property and developed houses. I kind of spliced out where old Sweetgrass used to be, but the lot that we're looking at is 2.8 acres. That 2.8 could seriously disrupt that other 12 acres. Is that fair? I'm not sure. Isabel pointed out, and I was going to make this comment immediately because I just really thought some of these the ideas of what the community wants when the petitioner was stating they don't want to look at a warehouse. I'm sure some people do and some people don't. The fact that the study didn't have public comment, I really think the whole idea of what the public wants is out the window. So I'm happy you guys did it. It gives direction, but still, I don't like leveraging that with my decision making. And that's all I have. And like I said earlier, I would really love to hear you guys give some direction of what you would want to see, so the petitioners know kind of what you're thinking, and maybe you could find a plan that works for everyone. Thank you. And sorry about the dogs. It seems to happen every time I unmute my mic.
It's the sound of your voice. Thank you, Tron. I see Commissioner Kinsey. If we are going to be moving into final comment here, I'd like to get a motion out on the table. So if you have a question, let's have questions here first. But if we're on to comment, I'd like to get a motion out so we can make comment on
Yeah, I
that
have a
motion.
question, Brad.
Jillian, you have a question or comment?
I was going to make a comment and a motion, but Israel,
Okay.
go ahead with your question first.
There you go. Yeah, go ahead, Israel.
Right, yeah, the question is the involvement of the neighborhood, because in the public comment, it seems that there wasn't any kind of engagement with the neighborhood about the project, and it seemed that there was a change from what was discussed with some neighbors, and now with this meeting, we could see that there were some changes in between. So I wonder how the voice from the neighborhood was taken into account.
Was that question directed at staff or at the petitioner?
The petitioner. pet
Tom
issue.
or Doug, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I don't know if Tom is muted or not, because Tom had really we had met with Jack and some others, oh gosh, back maybe, I think last November, December, I think, could be January. And we had the kind of the mix, we had one 5-story building, and then we had all the residential lots. And then as we talked with planning, then we added the second building because the city had really wanted to see more density here and more commercial space, quite honestly. But Tom has spoken with Jack and I think some of the other neighbors. I can't say, and you know, we had proposed to sit down with a group. We had tried to, and then everything happened. Then the pandemic hit, and that kind of stopped any real face-to-face meetings with anyone. Certainly, I'm completely for it. I mean, for, you know, the plans that we're working on now, as we take all of these comments tonight and the comments that we received from the commissioners' luncheon and others, you know, as we start working this plan towards, you know, some parking issues. I mean, we can't change the access. Hillside Drive is going to be our access, but certainly having a Zoom meeting or some way to get neighborhood interaction is, you know, something that we would do, obviously, and Eric has mentioned that over and over. So I'm sure that's something that if it hasn't happened to the level that the Plan Commission would like to see, rest assured it will happen.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? If not, we will go to Commissioner Kinsey for a comment and a motion.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate, first, I just want to say I appreciate Tron's comment that it is important for us to weigh in and offer comments so that we can influence the design of this, whatever happens next. But I would like to make a motion to continue this PUD 1720 McDowell Business Center to a second hearing. And then I hope we can weigh in with some comments about this.
I second that motion.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion and a second, and yeah, let's go on with our final comment then. And I think specifically, if we could, if you have opinions, voice them now on the density, the style, the ingress, egress, connectivity issues, anything that might shape this, the site plan between now and the next meeting.
This is Tom. Can I speak up just for a moment?
Yeah, are you responding to the previous question here?
Well, there was a question earlier whether there's been a phase 1 or phase 2, and there has been a phase 1. It was part of the original package that for bank approval. That was back in 2004. So just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Okay, any final comment then on the motion to continue this to a second hearing?
I have a comment.
Yes. go ahead.
I really appreciate the public coming and giving us their perspective. When we receive these packages, it comes in a form of, you know, just a report and some plans. Of course, we can go and we can look on the GIS and we can see the neighborhoods that's being affected or who's affecting, and we can, of course, we look at the road access, how people are going to get there and how they're going to get out by car or by foot or by bike. We're looking at all those details. But I think it's really, I appreciate when Bruce spoke that the developer is looking at the adjacent neighborhood and being considerate. Yes, density is important, but there are the correct places for those, there are correct sites for this situation. This site is difficult. this site does not support tall buildings with a lot of density, because you're going to overshadow the neighborhood, and it's a historic neighborhood. We're overshadowing and creating a huge problem with infrastructure, sewer, water, everything else, and traffic. I mean, the traffic, you know that the people that are going to live there are going to have cars, and they're going to have two, and they're not going to be, this is not going to be an affordable. I think we need to look, one thing that I get confused. So I sell real estate. One thing that I get confused is new buildings are not affordable. New buildings are expensive to build. They have to put years and years of planning into building something. They have to have a lot of money to be able to produce anything. So when they come to us with a plan, they are already 100,000, 200,000 in the hole. And it's for a plan that they don't even know if it's going to get approved. This developer, I mean, Bruce has said a couple of times that they want to make the transition from the neighborhood that is historic, and it's important part of the fabric of Bloomington, make it into either townhouses or two-story buildings, much smaller houses, which will match the neighborhood as well. And yes, there's going to be a few people that are going to live in this area. That is true. But those people are going to they're going to leave where they came from. And those buildings that they are leaving, their homes that they are upgrading or downgrading, or either way, will be available for other people. I understand the density. I understand the city's desire for density. But we need to look at this particular site. It has one entrance. So I think the direction for the initial conversation, as we heard tonight, was that they talked to the mayor and they said, yes, single family homes would be great. But now they are being pushed into putting high density. So now we have 2 5-story buildings, basically bookending, 2 bookends on the side of this. And it will overshadow. And there are other solutions. I mean, I know that there's a storage room there. Put some tall trees there. We'll cover the storage unit. I think I'm all in favor of high density, but we need to look at each site has a unique perspective of what it is. So I would encourage this site in particular to be very careful with the neighborhood to the west, and to be respectful to that neighborhood, and also see their limitations in terms of street and egress and traffic and infrastructure. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from commissioners? I see Commissioner Copper.
Yeah, I want to say I do think this is a good place for some density, and I like the idea of seeing that density along the park and then stepping down as you get into closer to the neighborhood. You know, a lot of this has been said already, and I don't want to repeat it too much, but you know, having multifamily units adjacent to that park instead of single family just makes that frontage available to so many more people. And I think that's really what we should be aiming for. I don't think we need more single family directly adjacent to a park like that. And then I want to, you know, in terms of the affordable housing question, it seems like this has come up from a number of comments, and we frequently have this discussion in the commission, and often, you know, kind of in disjointed pieces. But I think we need to note that new multifamily, even if it is expensive multifamily, it still has benefits community-wide. We need to look at the quantity of units that it's providing. As you look at that supply and demand equation, if we're putting basically what our city is lacking right now is the number of units. And I think we need to be explicit about that and look at that. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any other final comments? I see Commissioner Kinsey, and then I think Commissioner Kate.
Thanks. All right, well, there's a lot to like about this project, and I find it intriguing to think about what this beautiful Switchyard Park will allow us in terms of new forms of housing. As much as I am an urban person, so I don't mind a warehouse look, and I don't mind graffiti along the beeline, and but I will agree that I think this could be much more pleasing as some sort of family housing. So I'm eager to see what comes of this space. So I think this is an exciting opportunity, but I want to make sure we take our time and do a really thoughtful rendering and decision making about this process. I'm not bothered by having the city consultant project. It was done. I'd rather know about it and talk about it publicly than keep it a secret and pull it out when somebody wants to use it to either say, I told you so, or to offer some counter. So I'd rather talk about it publicly, that it is out there and available. And I appreciate the staff including that in this discussion today, because I think it's important for us to know that it exists. I won't be any more persuaded by it than I would any other consultant report or any other input, but I think it's important that we know it exists. And I think there might be ideas in it to consider as well as a community. So I will be reading it a little more thoroughly to see if there are some ideas that we want to bounce off and talk about with the developer. But nothing more jumped out at me in that consultant report other than the idea that I agree with what Neil Copper was just saying in terms of an interest in providing more people access to the park and its beautiful frontage. I think if we can do some more multifamily housing in this space, I think that would be great. And therefore, I'm really eager to see renderings in this next round. I would like to see step back. I want to see it much more integrated with the neighboring community. I want to see that. I think 3 stories is probably more likely. I don't think 5-story is going to cut it. I just don't see that given the space that's behind closer to Rogers as we move into the neighborhood, really allowing that transition from 5 stories easily to the residential, the very small single family residential units in McDowell. But I want to see it with elevation. So that I think is really important to think about. I am concerned about the hillside access. That is a real limitation of this space. And unless there is some real movement or change in the status of any of those alleys, if Driscoll is indeed not platted and it's, I think we need to know exactly what the status of that is. It sounded like Eric was pretty sure about that tonight, but I really want to make sure that we're absolutely certain of potential. But given Hillside as the access route, I think we have to see that as a constraint, but I guess it could also be considered a design feature, that egress, that entry and egress allows for a smaller footprint of perhaps some multifamily, but not massive structures. I'm also eager to really see how the bicycle and pedestrian aspects can be enhanced, and to think about how we can activate the beeline as a way into this space for people who might live in those houses. So I want to see a little more thought put into the bicycle ped potential of this. So I think I'm hoping for some more creativity around that. I really appreciate the LEED, all of the considerations for LEED certification. That's wonderful. I mean, that seems so important, and I want to thank the developer and for everyone who influenced that aspect of it. And then also looking at the pervious surfaces and what we have for that, knowing that the front yard is a huge park, reduces, I think, the need for a lot of landscaping and concerns about pervious and impervious surface, because we have the whole frontage of the park to really allow that space. So I'd like to see more of consideration for what this enormous park allows in terms of less landscaping for interesting townhomes in this space. So I'm excited about this. I'm really looking at how this treasured, highly visible space will be developed. And I really appreciate the developers seeking community input and how long this has been going on with community input. And I hope there's more of that as we progress through this next stage of this development. That's it for me. Sorry for taking so long, but thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kate?
No, actually, it was good that you said all of that because I don't really have anything to add. I would say that I agree with what Commissioner Kinsey just said and also Commissioner Copper. I think that this is a very tough site. It has a lot of constraints, and I'm concerned about the ingress and egress constraints that have already been mentioned. I appreciate all the thoughtful comments from the public, but also the all the work that's gone into this by the developer. I do think density is important. This is a big park. It's not a pocket park. It's not a, in that sense, it is a tremendous community resource for what could be a lot of people to really benefit from this. And also to provide, I think, it's not just the eyes on the park from a security standpoint, in honesty, to me, came through less as a priority. Increasing density, making the best use park in terms of giving many people across a range of affordability and housing the benefit and the improvement in their lives of having access to that resource, and also providing then housing for what could be a revitalization economically of that corridor. I actually think the South Walnut site is better suited to really high density, the 5-story type of density that we're talking about. So like Commissioner Kinsey and others, I'd like to see some kind of in-between approach that would be a much better suited to the McDowell neighborhood and transition, and also take account of what is a pretty severe ingress egress constraint. So so thanks to everyone. I know this is really tough, and a lot of people have been putting a lot of thought into it across the board.
Thank you. Any other comments from commissioners?
I have one very quick comment. I do agree with the owner and the petitioner today that amendment to the Thomson PUD is needed. This area has changed over the years. There's no doubting that. So just that was my final comment, since I felt like everything else I said was potentially controversial.
All right. Well, if there's no other commissioners who'd like to comment, I'll say my 2 cents. I think that this obviously is a tough spot. So first, I just want to just thank the petitioner. I can see how easy it would be for your head to be spinning trying to develop this spot with all the changes going on and seemingly constant changes in opinions on what should be here. And you've heard from all the comment that, there are many people who think this is too dense and many who think it's not dense enough. So you've obviously done something right in order to land somewhere in the middle. Density is important for the city generally, as Commissioner Copper mentioned. Adding units to our housing stock is important everywhere, and that will have an effect throughout the city as we add more units on putting downward pressure on prices. And so density is important, and I understand certainly the administration's desire to put density here, and I understand the consultant's desire to put density here when given the inputs that consultant had to work with. But I think if you look at the rendering, you can see, I think right away, lots of issues with this. access, certainly will give people access to the people who live in those units. But if the construction there is so dense, you actually cut off access for others. And it makes others feel disconnected from the park if they can't even catch a glimpse of it because of the buildings that are between them and the park. And so the transition is really, really important here, right? We have to get some density, but we also have to build it in such a way that it doesn't make other people feel cut off from the park. And so I think the plan that we've seen is a pretty decent compromise. And I think that was even a word that was used. I think there's some ways that it could be better. Some ideas that I would have specifically would be to replace some of those single family homes with some townhomes, to take the 2 end buildings and maybe turn that into 4 buildings. I think you may need to do that anyway in order to handle the ingress and egress issues. If you can't build a street underneath one of those buildings, you're going to have to put it right through one of those buildings, and that means splitting it into 2. And doing that on either end would also then at least keep the possibility open that ultimately you could continue that road on through over to Grimes. With the current design of that street sort of dead ending into the northern building, then it really doesn't matter what happens with the warehouse over time. There's not going to be any way to continue that. So I think about turning those 2 apartment buildings into 4. I think what that does is, it helps with the traffic issues, but it also creates some additional sight lines where this thing doesn't feel like such a monstrosity that would cut people off from the park. Now, of course, I know that there's cost issues involved, and so building more buildings costs more money. So I know some of these things may be feasible and some may not. But I do think if you could just have a little bit more consistency throughout in terms of massing, rather than having big bookends on the end and tiny little cottages in the middle, you could create a nicer transition that's a little bit more consistent. I don't have any problem at all with the parking and there being less parking here. This absolutely is going to put additional cars on the streets in the neighborhood behind, but those are public streets and and they're designed to have cars parked on them, and that's I think that's okay. I think that no matter what gets built here, we're going to see an increase in parking activity on streets. And if we need to control that through through parking, neighborhood parking zones and such, we'll be able to address that. But on the whole, I think this is headed in the right direction, and glad to see it moving forward. Look forward to hearing more and seeing more detail at the next meeting. So with that, I think we are ready to call the roll on the motion to continue this to a second hearing.
Great, thanks. Copper,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
and Kinsey.
Yes.
Great, motion passes. 1, 2, 3, 4,
Okay.
7-0.
Motion passes 7-0, and I believe that's the only petition we've got tonight. And so we are done with our business. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your input, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks,
We're adjourned.
Brad.
Yep.
Thank you.